This 80 Series Land Cruiser has less than 3,000 miles on a fresh rebuild, but today we're pulling the engine back out of the Land Cruiser. Oh man. Getting right into it, I have to start tearing apart the front of the Land Cruiser before anything else. Luckily, on the 80 Series, the entire front middle section of the radiator support is modular, which makes removing and installing the engine a lot easier. So the bumper, battery tray, hood, grill, radiator, AC condenser, and anything else in the way has to come out. And then we'll have a straight shot right down Broadway, or whatever they say, to pull this engine right out. I think if I were leaving the engine in the car to do this repair, I would still probably tear apart the front clip like this, just because it gives you so much access to the front of the motor. You gain a lot of real estate doing this, and it really doesn't take that much effort. Yeah, there's a lot of parts coming off, but it just affords you so much more room, and room is everything when you're working on a car, right? If you think of old trucks or whatnot, you can sit in the engine bay and work on the engine, and it's just so nice to be able to work on it. And somewhere along the way, you know, once we got into the 80s and early 90s, especially modern cars, you started losing that real estate in the engine bay. So just tearing apart the front like this just gives a lot more room. And as I said, even if we weren't yanking the motor out to do this, I'd probably still tear off the front to work on it in the car. All right, well, here we are after about, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours, just taking our time, moving very slow and deliberately, trying to not make a mess. As you guys can see there, ground and everything looking pretty clean. The pile of parts over there is stacking up. Had to clean up the shop before this so that we had room and space for everything. Keep clean and tidy just makes it easier while we're doing it. So one of the things about the Land Cruiser that's very cool is the entire front of it tears apart like you can see here. So when we do take out the engine with the transmission and the transfer case, which is a huge, extremely heavy combination, over 1,000 pounds, we can just come straight out the front here instead of trying to lift that thing up with the cherry picker and, you know, potentially tipping over or some other issue, especially on a lifted Land Cruiser like this. And this is exactly why we're going to pull the engine. As you guys can see, now that we're closer here, the leak we have is behind here where the galley plug is. We can't just pull the timing cover off. It's not that easy. There's bolts that go through the cylinder head, as you can see right here, into the timing cover. And then you have to also pull off the oil pans. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see very well in here. My shutter speed's going to get messed up. That's why it's all choppy. But there is a bar right here. Right there, that's welded to the frame. It's like a support brace, and the oil pan is right above that. As you can see, we got the oil pan right here. So there's not a lot of room to maneuver that, you know, into place when it's in the frame. Not to mention that's also a girdle to the block and bolted to the transmission. So is it doable in the frame? Yeah, but on the other hand, if I have to pull off the cylinder head and pull off the oil pans and fight with everything under the truck and pull off the cylinder head and everything else, I mean, man, we're only 2 to 3 hours into this at this point. It's easier to just pull everything out. So at this point, what do we have left? Well, we have to pop off the AC lines. We have to disconnect the wiring harness. The way that we're going to do this is we're going to unbolt the harness from the firewall right here and pull the ECU connectors out of the firewall grommet instead of having to go through and unplug every single thing on the engine. It's going to be a lot easier that way. We have the throttle cable, we have the heater hoses, we have the power steering lines, the drive shafts, the shift linkage, and probably some small other odds and ends that I'm forgetting right now, but we'll definitely get to it. Hook up the crane and yank this guy out of here. There are 3 throttle cables. There's going to be the one that attaches to your pedal, there's the cruise control, and then there is the kickdown cable if you have an automatic, which if you're in the States, you have an automatic. We never got the cool cars over here. Then we remove the 10mm bolts that hold on the harness support to the firewall, and we set that out of the way. That leads us to the most annoying task of all, especially if you live in a rust area, removing the exhaust. These things have the weirdest exhaust. It's routed outside the frame rail with this weird dual catalytic
catalytic converter situation, I just wanted to cut this thing off, but I didn't.
My rock slider is blocking the catalytic converters from being able to drop out. You can see there, they're hitting that bottom skid plate. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of taking that skid plate or that rock slider off, you can see that we're disconnected from the Y pipe right there. When we lift the engine out, it should get past that and we should be able to just drop the Y pipe then. Now we got to get this fuel line, which is right here. This goes to the fuel filter. This guy is really easy to forget because it's so damn hidden under the intake manifold here. Once we get this guy off, let's see, we just got the drive shafts and a couple of other things, motor mounts, transmission mount, cross member. We should be able to lift this thing out. We'll just let that fuel drain out of there, then we'll pop the line off before we pull the motor. It's really hard to show this on camera, but we also need to remove the starter cable and basically this part of the transmission harness, not the whole thing since it's going to come out with the engine and transmission, but we do have to follow this cable here, and you're going to get a ground that goes to the engine here, as well as a harness that's just clipped alongside underneath the intake manifold there. Again, really hard to show on camera, but we have to make sure that's all removed too. All right, boys, we just got the drive shafts out, which means all we have to do now is pull off the shift linkage from the shifter, loosen the motor mount bolts and the transmission cross member, and we can pull this thing out. But first, I want to show you guys this really cool marking compound that I got. This is called Torque Tattle. I'm not sponsored by this company, but I want to show you guys how cool this is. So there are certain bolts that you want to keep track of and make sure they don't move. You see these little yellow marks that I have right here on this castle nut. I want to make sure that doesn't move. Of course, that's our pitman arm. If that bolt comes off, we're dying. We're going to lose our steering and it's not good. So this, instead of using a paint pen, does the same thing. It's like a hardened gel and it's really nice and vibrant. So for example, we want to keep track of where this drive shaft spline is. We don't want this thing to potentially fall out and then we don't know where to put it back in, might throw it off balance. We can just take our marking compound here, our Torque Tattle, and we can make a little line. And now we have, I mean, look how vibrant that is. Now that'll dry into like a hardened bead. And yeah, it's gonna split here on the spline, whatever. We're still gonna see on this end and this end how to line this thing back up in the future. So just a cool product that I thought was really interesting. I'll put down their Instagram handle right here at the bottom of the screen. Now I wanna address the LS swap controversy that I saw in the comments on the last post. I did ask you guys what you wanted me to do, so I really do appreciate all the comments. And I have a lot of people in there saying, yeah, swap the LS. And I have a couple of purists in there I can tell that want me to do like a 1UZ, 2UZ, or 3UZ. But we're trying to reduce complexity, keep reliability, which the UZ would do, and add parts availability. The UZ only does one of those three things. The LS does all three. And it's just easier in all aspects. So I'm open to the debate, but that's my thoughts with it. Power, reliability, very easy to get the parts for. I mean, the list could go on and on and on. Whew, well, we're ready to pull the motor now. You can see I backed the Land Cruiser all the way up to the bay door so we have enough room. This is going to be a really long drivetrain because we're going to have the engine, the transmission, and the transfer case. So it's going to be huge coming out of this thing. Last time I pulled this out, I did the motor first, then the transmission. This time I'm doing it by the book and pulling the whole thing out. So just in case you're watching this and you have an 80 series, this is how far you have to tear it down to pull the motor out. And here's everything that we took out of the Land Cruiser to get to this point. Believe it or not, this is still way easier than pulling off the oil pan and pulling off the cylinder head in the frame. I would so much rather just pull everything out like this. If you have the space for it, of course, this is the best way to do it. We're airing down the tires so that the whole entire truck is lower, so that when we lift this engine up, it's safer, because this is going to be a heavy, huge unit we pull out of here. We need the truck to be a little bit lower.
Well, I got ahead of myself and started yanking the engine out before hitting the record button, but I also forgot to set up my hoist correctly. I left it on the half-ton setting, and you can see we have other settings here which would have been way more appropriate for this weight. I also almost really hurt myself when initially lifting the motor out. I was in the engine bay shaking the engine out of the mount when it suddenly broke free and pinned my leg up against the frame in the engine. Luckily, no damage to me or the truck, but it could have been really bad. Even though the front of the Land Cruiser is torn apart and we have a straight shot to rip this motor out, it's not really that simple. We still have a very heavy load on this crane, and it's long, so it's very awkward as we're pulling it out. We're hitting the frame rails, we're hitting the cross member, we're hitting the core support, and it's a little sketchy.
That is sketchy.
And of course, it wouldn't be as bad if I had set the crane up correctly and properly set up the load leveler and maybe had an additional support strap. But I got excited, and eventually we'll get the motor out of here.
Whew. Man, that was sketchy, especially since I accidentally left it on the half-ton mark right there. Motor fell on me when I was on the frame rail because I was being an idiot and almost broke my leg. That could have been bad, especially since I didn't have my phone on me. I wouldn't be able to call my wife to come help me, so I'd just be in here, you know, broken leg and all. But there it is. Surprisingly, we didn't forget to take one thing off. Came out, you know, all things considered, smooth as butter. Wow.
Hold on, don't leave yet. Here's a clip from the next video where we find out what's wrong with the engine. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you guys in the next one.
All right, we're gonna uncover the problem. Is it the oil galley plug? We're about to find out. The anticipation is killing me. Okay, let's see.